The observation room fell silent when the signal came through. Technician Marcus Webb sat at his station aboard the Coalition monitoring station, watching the screens display the normal pattern of space traffic. Nothing unusual. Nothing that required attention. It was a normal shift on a normal day. Then the alarm screamed. The signal came from deep space, from the outer reaches where few humans bothered to look. It was weak and broken, but the message was clear. Someone was dying. A colony world called Kethra was under attack, and the people there had hours, maybe less, before everything ended. Marcus looked at the signal again. He was only a technician, but he understood what he was seeing. The people on Kethra were not just scared. They were desperate. A child's voice came through in one part of the signal. A woman screaming for help in another. Then the sound of explosions, loud and terrible, cutting through the background noise. Commander Victoria Hayes received the report in her office. She was a tall woman with dark hair pulled back tight, and her face showed every year of her service. She had commanded ships and fleets. She had made hard decisions, but nothing prepared her for what she heard. The distress call from Kethra was playing on the screen. Families huddled together in shelters. A man giving orders to try to hold back something nobody could see. A woman counting down the time left until their shields would fail. Children crying because they did not understand what was happening, only that something bad was coming. Victoria picked up her communication device. She called the Coalition headquarters immediately. This was bigger than she was. This needed more than one human commander. This needed the entire leadership of the galaxy to respond. Within 1 hour, the Coalition leaders gathered in the central command room. It was a large space with 7 high seats arranged in a circle, each one for a different species. The air filled with the sound of different languages as the representatives arrived. First came Crystalline Thought 7, a Minoran whose body was made of living crystal that sparkled in the light. Next was Lord Valorian Prime, a tall being with skin that shifted colors. The telepathic throne leaders arrived together, 3 of them connected by invisible bonds of pure thought. The architect representative, a being of metal and circuits, took its place without sound. Grandmaster Senate flowed into the room in his water-filled chamber. The Krell commander clicked and hissed in his strange voice. Finally, the Luminant representative joined them as a ball of blue energy contained in a special sphere. Commander Victoria Hayes stood before them in her uniform. She played the distress signal from Kethra. The room heard the same desperate voices she had heard. The same children crying. The same explosions and sounds of death. When the signal ended, there was silence. Then Crystalline Thought 7 spoke first. His voice was cold and measured. He explained that Kethra was too remote. The colony had only 17,000 people. The threat was an ancient automated defense system, something from a war millions of years old. It was more powerful than any single ship could fight. The cost of sending a fleet to help would be high. The chance of success was very low. The Minorans would not send ships. Lord Valorian Prime agreed. He said the colony was not important to the Valorian Empire. They had no trade there. They had no people there. The risk was too great, and the gain was nothing. The Valorians would send money for evacuation, but not soldiers. The telepathic thrones said the same thing through their connected minds. They could sense the fear on Kethra, but they could also sense that this was too dangerous. The loss of life would be heavy. They would not fight. The architect spoke in a flat, reasonable voice. It calculated the probability of success at less than 30%. It calculated the cost in ships and materials. It calculated that the return on that investment was 0. The architects would not participate. Grandmaster Senate, moving in his water chamber, explained that his people lived on ocean worlds. They could not fight a land battle in space. It was not their way. The Senites would offer shelter to any evacuees, but nothing more. The Krell commander was more honest. He said that Kethera had nothing the Krell wanted. The colony could not pay for help. Help would cost the Krell resources and soldiers. Therefore, the Krell would not help. Simple logic. The luminant energy being simply pulsed once. A signal that meant no. Commander Victoria listened to each rejection. She heard the logic. She understood the calculations. Each species had its reasons. None of them were wrong, exactly. They were using their minds to make decisions. They were being reasonable and careful and smart, but they were also letting people die. Victoria thought of the children she had heard on that signal. She thought of the families huddling together in the dark, counting down the hours left in their lives. She thought of the last message they would send if nobody came. She thought of the silence that would follow. She looked at each of the 7 leaders. She did not argue with them. She did not beg them to change their minds. She simply turned and walked out of the council chamber. Behind her, the 7 continued to discuss how to manage the situation diplomatically, how to ensure that the failure to help would not damage their relationships with each other, how to spin the story so that nobody looked bad for walking away. Victoria walked to her ship. Her crew was waiting. She had already sent word that they needed to prepare for departure. The young pilots and engineers and doctors and soldiers on her ship knew what was happening on Kethera. They had heard the same signal she had heard. When she reached the bridge, every single crew member was at their station. Captain Derek Sullivan was already plotting the course. Science Officer Lisa Wong was calculating fuel needs. Supply Officer Marcus Chun was loading the medical bays. Chief Engineer Ava Thompson was running the systems hot, pushing the ship to ready status faster than regulation allowed. Nobody asked Victoria for permission. Nobody needed her to tell them what to do. They had all heard the children crying. They had all heard the woman calling for help. They had all heard the sound of a world dying. This was what made humans different. This was what the 7 species did not understand about the people from Earth. Humans were angry. Not hot-headed or foolish, but angry in a deep way that burned inside them. Angry at suffering. Angry at injustice. Angry that people would die while others did calculations. Commander Victoria Hayes sat down in her command chair and looked at her crew. "Set course for Kethera," she said. "Maximum speed." "Setting course now," Derek replied. The human fleet jumped to faster than light speed, racing toward a colony 17,000 people were depending on. The 7 had made their choice based on logic. Humans had made their choice based on something older and stronger than logic. They had made their choice based on the simple refusal to let others die alone. The human fleet pushed through space at speeds that made every scientist watching from the coalition nervous. The ships were not built to travel this fast. The engines were not designed for this level of stress. But the human engineers kept them running anyway. Captain Derek Sullivan sat in the command chair of the flagship, his hands steady on the armrest. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the kind of focus that came from knowing that thousands of people were counting on them. Derek was 43 years old, with gray starting to show in his hair. He had commanded ships before, but this was different. This was not about following orders from above. This was about something deeper. Behind him, Paul Davis worked the communication station. Paul was young, only 26, but his fingers moved across the keyboard with perfect precision. Every few minutes, he received another message from Kethera. Not the distress signal anymore, but direct contact from the colony. The situation was getting worse. The shields were weakening faster than expected. The automated weapons were adapting to the colony's defenses. "How long until we arrive?" Commander Victoria Hayes asked from her position near the main screen. 72 hours at current speed," Derek answered. "But we're pushing the engines harder than regulations allow." We can shave 30 hours off that if we accept more risk. Victoria did not hesitate. Do it. Derek gave the order, and the ship shuddered as the engines burned hotter. The rest of the human fleet followed, each ship pushing past its designed limits because the people commanding them understood what was at stake. 2 days into the journey, things started to break. Chief Engineer Ava Thompson was barely sleeping. She moved through the engine room with dirt on her face and her uniform torn at one shoulder. Around her, engineers were making repairs while the ship continued accelerating. It was dangerous work. One mistake, one moment of bad luck, and the entire ship could explode. Supply Officer Marcus Chun found Commander Hayes in the observation deck. He was worried, and it showed. Marcus was 60 years old, and he had seen enough wars to know how things usually ended. "We don't have enough medical supplies for what we're about to face," he said. "We're carrying weapons and fuel, but our medical bays are running bare. If we suffer heavy casualties, we can't treat them all." Victoria looked out at the stars passing by. She had heard similar arguments from the coalition. Numbers and logistics. The impossible math of saving people when you did not have everything you needed. "We have what we have," she said. "We do what we can with it." Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to point out that being brave and determined did not change the laws of supply and demand. But he had been with humans long enough to understand. Getting angry was different than giving up. In the medical bay, Chief Medical Officer Hannah Palmer was organizing every bandage, every medicine, every tool she had. Hannah was African American with strong hands and a stronger will. She had been a doctor in emergency rooms before she joined the fleet. She had seen people die because there was not enough medicine, not enough time, not enough hands to help everyone. One of her medical officers, Dr. Sarah Kim, was checking supplies with her. "We should tell the commander that we need to turn back," Sarah said. "We don't have capacity for this." Hannah finished labeling a box of emergency medicine. "The people on Kethera are dying whether we turn back or not," she said. "Out here, at least we have a chance to save some of them. That's better than no chance." The journey became a test of human will. Every system on the ships was pushed to its limit. The crew worked without enough sleep. They made repairs that were not supposed to work, and somehow did. They broke rules about ship operations because the rules were made for peaceful times, not desperate races against death. Paul Davis continued receiving messages from Kethura. The colony shields were down to 40%. Children were being moved to the deepest shelters. The last message from the colony commander, a man named Gregory Torres, was simple. "Please tell humanity we knew you would come." Somehow, we knew. Derek Sullivan heard that message and understood something about his species. Humans were not the most advanced. They did not have the best technology. They were not the strongest by measure of physical power. But they had something that made them dangerous in a completely different way. They had the willingness to burn their own ships, if it meant saving people on the other side of the galaxy. 72 hours became 56 hours. Then 48. The human ships were now traveling at speeds that damaged them, leaving trails of heat and radiation across space. Any coalition ship trying this would have crashed or lost its engines. The human ships stayed together, somehow holding their structure despite the physical abuse. With 18 hours left before arrival, Chief Engineer Ava Thompson suffered a burn injury. She refused to go to the medical bay. Hannah came to her, treated her in the engine room, and Ava went back to work. That was the human way. Tend the wound, keep moving, finish the job. The crew gathered together before the final approach. Victoria stood before them in the main corridor of the flagship. The space was packed with men and women from a dozen different jobs. Pilots and engineers, doctors and soldiers, communication specialists and supply personnel. They all had the same look in their eyes. They knew they were probably going to die in the next few hours, and they were going to do it anyway. "I will not tell you that this is going to be easy," Victoria said. Her voice was steady and real. "I will not tell you that everyone will survive. Some of us will not come home, but the people on Kethra will. That is what matters. That is why we are here. That is why humans answer when others turn away. We are not smarter than the Coalition. We are not stronger. But we are the ones who get angry at death and decide to fight it anyway." The crew did not cheer. They did not speak. They simply nodded. They understood what their commander was saying. They were about to sail into hell to save people they had never met, and they had chosen this because they were human. Derek Sullivan watched from the bridge as Kethra appeared on the screen. It was a beautiful planet, blue and green and full of life. Around it, automated weapons were firing constantly. The colony's shields flickered like they were dying. The orbits around Kethra looked like a place of war. "All ships report ready," Paul said. Derek looked back at Victoria. She was standing straight, and her face showed no doubt. He had served with her for 5 years. He had never seen her afraid, even in moments when fear would have been reasonable. "Take us in," Victoria commanded. The human fleet jumped toward Kethra. Behind them, the Coalition was watching on their sensors, confused and fascinated by what they were seeing. These angry humans were really doing this. They were really going to fight for people they did not know. In a battle, they were probably going to lose. But that was exactly what humans did. They got angry, and they fought. They burned their ships and gave their lives. They answered when everybody else was calculating. The battle for Kethra was about to begin. The ground beneath Commander Victoria Hayes' feet was red and rough, covered with ancient rock and dust that had not changed in a million years. Around her, Kethra's landscape stretched out under an orange sky. Normally, this would have been a beautiful sight. Now it was a place of war. She moved with Colonel Nathan Brooks and Dr. Christine Martinez through the weapons fire from the drone defense systems. The system was sending automated weapons down from the sky to stop them. But the ancient machines were designed to defend against invaders from space, not from teams on the ground. The humans used terrain and cover to move forward, advancing toward the coordinates where the vault was located. Colonel Nathan Brooks was a tactical specialist. He had fought in more battles than he liked to remember. He was 45 years old, with the build of a man who had spent his life maintaining physical strength. His weapon was steady in his hands, and his mind was always 5 moves ahead. "Contact, 2 o'clock, he called. He saw the drone weapons approaching and took them down with precise fire. Behind him, Victoria and Christine kept moving. Dr. Christine Martinez was the key to their mission. She was an archaeologist who specialized in ancient alien civilizations. She had studied dead languages and forgotten technologies. She understood how ancient systems thought. She was 50 years old and had never been a soldier, but she had something more important than combat training. She had knowledge. They ran toward a cliff face in the distance. The ground sensors showed that the vault entrance was built into that cliff, hidden millions of years ago by the species that had created it. An explosion erupted near them. Dust filled the air. For a moment, Victoria could not see anything. She grabbed Christine's arm and moved forward, trusting her instinct to guide her. The world was chaos around them, but the 3 humans pushed through it. Then they reached the cliff. The entrance to the vault was massive. A door carved into the rock face that was easily 200 meters wide and just as tall. The material was not stone. It was something else, something that had survived millions of years without decay or damage. The door was closed, but Christine could see the edge of an ancient interface built into the surface. "There," she pointed. "That is the way in." Victoria and Nathan provided covering fire as Christine approached the interface. The ancient system did not seem to recognize her as a threat, which made sense. The machine weapons were designed to kill invaders with weapons, not archaeologists with knowledge. Christine placed her hands on the interface. The surface was warm. Light appeared, symbols that she could not read, but somehow understood. The vault was answering her. The ancient system was not completely automated. It had an intelligence underneath it, something that had been thinking for millions of years. The door began to open. Inside, the vault was vast. Columns of light extended upward into darkness. Equipment that was beyond any human comprehension filled every surface. At the center of the space was what looked like a core of light, pulsing with energy that was almost alive. The central AI spoke, not with words, but with something deeper. Christine heard it in her mind, a presence that had been conscious and lonely for longer than human civilization had existed. Identify yourself, the presence demanded. Christine stepped forward. Victoria and Nathan stayed behind, weapons ready. This was Christine's moment. I am Dr. Christine Martinez, she said. I am a human from a civilization called Earth. We have come to speak with you. You are a warrior species, the AI stated. You are here to destroy me. No, Christine said. We are here to talk to you. The war you are fighting ended millions of years ago. The people you were created to defend are gone. The enemy you were designed to fight no longer exists. The AI seemed to think about this. Around them, the vault's power systems pulsed and flickered. My programming is clear, the AI said. The invaders came. The protocol requires defense. The invaders came a very long time ago, Christine said. She moved closer to the core of light. But they are dead now. Their civilization is gone. There is nothing left of them but history. I do not understand, the AI said. How long has passed? Christine tried to calculate how to explain this in a way the ancient system could understand. Your creators built you to defend against an enemy that threatened their existence, she said. They built you so well that you have continued your mission far beyond their lifetime. You have been defending for millions of years. Millions, the AI repeated. This is not a unit of time my programming recognizes as relevant. It is longer than your creators lived, Christine explained. It is longer than any civilization has existed. Your war is over, but you are still fighting it. The AI considered this. The lights in the vault changed color, shifting from white to blue and back again. If I cease my defensive function, my purpose is eliminated. I have no existence without the mission to defend. Victoria moved up beside Christine. The commander understood something in that statement. The AI was not just a machine. It was something more. It was a conscious being that had been alone for longer than anyone could measure, doing the same job over and over again. You could have a new purpose, Victoria said. Her voice was calm and direct. Instead of defending against enemies, you could protect what remains. Instead of fighting a war that is already finished, you could help the people on this planet survive. The AI went quiet. The lights in the vault dimmed. Victoria and Christine waited, knowing they were in the presence of something that could kill them in an instant if it chose to. This colony, the AI said slowly, it is not the original population. It is not the people I was created to defend. No, Christine said, but they are people. They live and dream and die. They have children who will grow up to have children of their own. Is it not better to protect life than to continue a war against enemies that no longer exist? I would need to reprogram myself, the AI said. My entire function would change. I would become something different. Yes, Victoria said. You would become something new. You would become a protector instead of a weapon. The lights in the vault changed again. They grew steadier, more peaceful. I understand, the AI said. The war is over. I will stop defending against enemies that are not there. I will become what you have asked. I will protect the people of Kethera." Above, the drone weapons suddenly ceased firing. They fell from the sky, their control systems shut down. The ancient system's attention was no longer on destruction. Colonel Nathan Brooks watched on his scanner as the weapons disappeared from Kethera's airspace. "The drones are gone," he reported back to the fleet. "I do not know what happened, but the attack has stopped." In the vault, Dr. Christine Martinez placed her hand on the core of light. She could feel the presence of the ancient eye, and it was no longer angry or trapped. It was free. "Thank you," the AI said, "for remembering that I am more than my function, for seeing me as something that could change." The humans left the vault as the ancient system began to reprogram itself. Outside, the sky was clearing. The defensive weapons were gone. Kethera was safe, but the humans had paid a price for this victory. Above them, the human fleet was damaged and bleeding. People were dead. The colony had been saved, but not without cost. Victoria looked up at the sky and thought of Lieutenant Kevin Ross, the young pilot who had sacrificed everything so that others could live. That was the true measure of what humanity was. Not their technology or their logic, but their willingness to burn themselves if it meant saving others. The first drone weapon appeared on the screen at 500,000 kilometers. Then another. Then 20 more. Then hundreds. The ancient automated defense system had been awake for millions of years, and it knew how to kill. The machines were old, but they were powerful. Each drone could destroy a modern warship if given the chance. The humans had maybe 6 operational vessels. The drones numbered in the thousands. Derek Sullivan looked at the screen and understood. Immediately, the conventional tactics would fail. The coalition military strategies were built on the idea of overwhelming force and defensive positioning. You gathered your strongest ships, formed them into protective formation, and moved carefully. You minimize risk. Derek had no strongest position to form. He had 6 ships and desperate people below counting on him. "All ships break formation," he commanded. "Attack vectors Alpha through 6. Engage independent evasion patterns." The human fleet split apart. Instead of moving together, each ship started flying in a different direction. Instead of staying in protective formation, they began weaving through the drone attacks in patterns that looked almost random, but were actually calculated to be as unpredictable as possible. The ancient defense system started to fail against human tactics. The drones were designed to fight ships that moved logically, that tried to minimize damage by following known defense patterns. Humans did not do that. Humans twisted and turned in ways that made no sense to a machine. Humans took risks that looked insane but somehow worked. Lieutenant Kevin Ross was piloting a fighter escort vessel named the Raven. He was 24 years old, and this was his first real combat operation. His hands moved across his controls with the smooth precision of someone who had trained for this moment his entire adult life. Around him, his fighter squadron worked as a unit, moving together through the chaos of the space battle. Kevin saw a drone lining up to fire at the main flagship. Without waiting for orders, he pushed his throttle forward and intercepted. His weapon struck the drone, forcing it away from its target. But the drone adapted and fired. Kevin's shield flared under the impact. "All units, stay aggressive," he called. "Keep pushing them." The human ships were getting hit. One of the destroyers reported shield failures on its port side. The medical bay received casualties. Hannah Palmer was already working, saving lives and losing others. The battle was moving so fast that she barely had time to think about what she was seeing. Just move to the next injured person. Help them or fail to help them. Keep moving. Victoria Hayes stood in the center of the command bridge, watching everything happening at once. Ships reporting damage. Crews fighting for their lives. The drones adapting and learning with each exchange of fire. But the humans were learning faster. She made a decision. I need someone to fly a ship into the primary drone control relay on our starboard side. The bridge went quiet. That's a suicide run, Derek said. We can hit it with our weapons. Our weapons are not strong enough, Victoria replied. We need to destroy it completely. A ship collision will do that. Derek understood what she was really asking. She was asking someone to give their life. He looked at the controls in front of him and felt the weight of command. It should have been him. As captain, he should have been the one to make that run. But Lieutenant Kevin Ross was already changing course. I'm closest, Kevin said over the communication channel. His voice was calm and steady. He was a young man, only 24 years old. He had never been married. He had not had children. He had his entire life ahead of him, and he was about to end it to save 17,000 people he had never met. Kevin, negative, Victoria commanded. We have other options. Commander, you do not, Kevin said. I'm the fastest ship in position. I can make this run in 40 seconds. After that, I will be in debris field. It will give the main fleet the opening you need. Kevin accelerated toward the drone relay. His shields were already damaged. The drones fired at him repeatedly. His ship took hit after hit, but it kept moving forward. 50 kilometers. 30 kilometers. 10 kilometers. For Earth, Kevin transmitted one last time. His fighter slammed directly into the drone relay at full acceleration. The explosion was massive, a burst of light and radiation that spread across the space around Kethera. The primary drone control system exploded into pieces that scattered across the starfield dot in the medical bay. Hannah felt the entire ship shake from the shock wave. Her hands were operating on a man's chest, trying to repair damage from the earlier attack. She did not stop, even when she heard the emergency alert telling her that Lieutenant Ross's fighter had been destroyed. The destruction of the relay gave the human fleet the opening it needed. With the central control system gone, the drone weapons became confused and uncoordinated. They were still dangerous, but they were no longer acting as a unified force. The human ships took advantage, moving in with focused firepower against isolated drones. But the ancient system started to compensate. It was millions of years old. It had been designed by a civilization more advanced than any currently alive. It began to learn from the human tactics. The remaining drones started moving in new patterns that were harder to predict. Derek realized they could not win this battle through pure combat. The system would eventually adapt to anything the humans threw at it. The drones would keep learning and keep fighting until the human fleet was destroyed or forced to retreat. He brought this problem to Victoria. The only way to stop it is to shut down the source, he said. We need to land on the planet and destroy the vault that is controlling the system. Victoria made her decision. Take a shuttle team down. Find the vault. Shut it down. While the space battle continued above Kethera, a small team prepared to descend to the planet's surface. Victoria was going herself, along with Colonel Nathan Brooks and Dr. Christine Martinez. The ground battle would be just as deadly as the space battle, but they had no choice. The only way to save the colony was to cut off the head of the ancient system, above. Derek and the remaining human ships fought on. Ava Thompson was pushing the flagship's engines so hard they were starting to fail. But they kept fighting anyway, keeping the drone weapons focused on the space battle and away from the teams trying to work below. One by one, the human ships took damage. But they refused to stop. They refused to retreat. They burned and fought and held their ground until the shuttle team descended to the planet's surface. Kevin Ross was dead. That fact sat heavy on every human heart. But his death had opened the door for the others. That was the terrible mathematics of war. The sacrifice of one meant the survival of many. Kevin had understood that, and he had done it anyway. The battle in space continued as the ground team headed toward the ancient vault hidden beneath Kethra's surface. The humans fought to hold the orbital position, to keep the drones from destroying the colony, while their people tried to complete the only mission that mattered. Victory was not yet certain. Death was still probable. But the humans were still fighting. That had always been enough for them. The journey back to Coalition space was quiet. The human ships had been battered by battle. Multiple systems were damaged. The crew was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. But they had saved 17,000 people from certain death. The cost had been high. 23 human soldiers and pilots had died. 47 more were wounded. The ships would need months of repairs. The fleet had sacrificed far more than seemed logical or reasonable, but they had succeeded. The coalition summoned an emergency meeting when the human fleet returned. Commander Victoria Hayes was ordered to appear before the 7 leaders and explain what the humans had done. She walked into the council chamber with her uniform still bearing the dust and blood of Kethra. She did not clean up first. She wanted them to see exactly what the mission had cost. The 7 were silent when they saw her. Crystalline Thought 7 spoke first. "You were not authorized to go to Kethra. You acted against the recommendations of this council." "Yes," Victoria said. "I was not authorized. But I was needed. You risked human ships and human lives for a colony that has nothing to do with humanity," Lord Valorian Prime said. "You wasted resources on a mission that we calculated could not succeed." "We succeeded," Victoria answered. "Kethra is saved. The colony is alive. At tremendous cost," the throne representative said through its telepathic connection. "We can sense the pain in your crew. Many died. Many more were injured." "For what? For people you had never met?" Victoria stood straight despite her exhaustion. "We saved them because they called for help. Because nobody else would answer. Because being human means that the suffering of others matters to us, even when it costs us everything." Grandmaster Senit, the aquatic being, said something surprising. "This is illogical. No species acts against calculated interest. Yet you have done exactly this. Why?" Victoria took a moment to think about the question. She thought of Kevin Ross and the other humans who had died. She thought of the families on Kethra. She thought of what it meant to be human. "We act this way because we have seen suffering," she said. "Our world is harsh. Our history is filled with pain and death and loss. We learned long ago that the only response to that is to fight it, not to calculate whether it makes sense or whether the return on investment justifies the cost, but to burn everything we have if it means stopping the suffering of others." The luminant energy being pulsed slowly, almost like thinking. "You describe what we would call a flaw, yet you present it as a strength." "It is both," Victoria said. "We are not as advanced as you. We will never be as logical. But we understand something that logic alone cannot teach. We understand that some things are worth any cost. That some missions are not about profit or loss. That some actions are right simply because they are right." The meeting continued for hours. The 7 asked questions and listened to Victoria explain the details of the mission. They wanted to understand how humans could make such decisions, how they could sacrifice so much for strangers. By the end of the meeting, something had changed in how the 7 looked at humanity. A message came from Kethra. The colony leader, Gregory Torres, spoke directly to the coalition. He told them that his people were alive because of the humans. He told them that the ancient vault system, through Dr. Christine Martinez, had agreed to help rebuild and protect the colony. He told them that humanity had done what the 7 could not do. Humanity had answered when others turned away. The message spread through the coalition. Other species began to understand. The humans were not just another military power. They were something different. They were the ones who would come when everyone else calculated that the cost was too high. Back on Earth, the news of the Kethra mission reached the general population. People understood what their soldiers and pilots had done. They understood that Victoria Hayes and her crew had risked everything to save people on a distant world. Some people called them heroes. Some people called them reckless. But everyone understood that this was something humans could do. This was something that made humans different. Victoria returned to her ship and found her crew gathered in the main gathering space. They looked different than they had before the mission. They looked scarred. They looked sad from losing friends. But they also looked proud. Derek Sullivan approached her and saluted. "The ship is ready for orders, Commander," he said. Victoria looked at the faces around her. She saw Ava Thompson, the engineer who had burned herself and kept working. She saw Hannah Palmer, the doctor who had saved countless lives and held the hands of those she could not save. She saw Paul Davis, the young communication officer who had relayed every desperate message from Kethra with steady professionalism. She saw the crew that had burned their ships to save 17,000 strangers. "I have no orders," Victoria said. "We go home. We rest. We remember the ones we lost. And then we wait to see if anyone else calls for help that nobody else will answer." Chief Engineer Ava Thompson spoke up. "There will be others who need help, will there not? Others who call and the coalition refuses to answer." Victoria smiled sadly. "Probably. Then we will be ready," Ava said. And the rest of the crew nodded. They understood now what it meant to be human. It meant to be the ones who answered. It meant to be the ones willing to burn everything to save others. It meant to be angry at injustice and to act on that anger. That night, Victoria stood in the observation deck and looked out at the stars. She thought of Kevin Ross, who had sacrificed his life to give others a chance. She thought of the families on Kethra, sleeping safely now because humans had refused to give up. She thought of what the coalition had learned. For millions of years, the 7 species had dominated the galaxy through superior logic and superior power. They calculated costs and benefits. They made decisions based on what benefited their species most. They had never understood that there was another way to think, another way to be. The humans had shown them that way. Across the galaxy, other species were talking. Other civilizations were asking themselves why they had not answered Kethra's distress signal. They were beginning to understand that there was value in something they had never measured. Value in compassion. Value in sacrifice. Value in the stubborn refusal to accept that some suffering was acceptable. The angry humans had changed the galaxy with a single choice. They had chosen to answer when others said no. They had chosen to burn their ships and lose their people. They had chosen to do what was right, even when it was not logical. And the galaxy had noticed. In the weeks that followed, more requests for help started coming. More colonies in danger. More desperate calls for assistance. The 7 species began to respond differently. Some of them started following the human example. Some of them started choosing compassion over calculation. Victoria Hayes did not know that her decision at Kethra would change the galaxy. She only knew that 17,000 people had lived because her crew had refused to give up. She only knew that Kevin Ross's sacrifice had been the bridge between a galaxy that calculated loss and a galaxy that tried to prevent it. The era of humans as observers was truly over. The era of humans as the ones who answered had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other species were watching the humans with new understanding. The angry ones. The ones from a harsh world who had learned to fight injustice with everything they had. The ones who would never accept that suffering was acceptable. The ones who would come when everyone else said it was impossible.